True story, animal bond, survival. The dog threw itself in front of him and saved his life. A story about loyalty, instinct, and the invisible thread between a man and his dog. He was seconds away from death. He just didn't know it yet. The road was quiet, the afternoon sun low and blinding, and Marcus had stepped off the curb without looking. His mind somewhere else entirely, his body moving on autopilot, the way it had every single day for the past 3 years. He had a headset in one ear, a coffee in his left hand, a leash in his right, and at the other end of that leash was Rex, a 3-year-old mixed breed with a barrel chest, a face full of wrinkles, and the kind of eyes that seemed to understand things humans couldn't. In the half-second before Marcus's foot fully left the sidewalk, Rex did something no training could have taught him. He didn't bark. He didn't pull. He launched, all 48 pounds of him, sideways and directly into Marcus's legs, sending both of them tumbling backward onto the concrete just as a black pickup truck, its driver distracted and moving well above the speed limit, blew through the intersection without slowing down. The truck missed Marcus by less than a foot. The rush of air moved his hair. The sound, a mechanical scream of rubber and engine, didn't fully register until it was already gone. Marcus sat on the sidewalk for a long moment. His coffee was spilled. His knee was bleeding. Rex was sitting on top of his chest, panting, tail wagging slowly, looking at him with that expression Marcus had never quite been able to name. The one that said, "I see you. I've always seen you." This is not a story about a miracle. It's a story about what happens when we stop long enough to understand the creature sitting at our feet, and what they are willing to do for us, without asking for anything in return. A bond built before words. Marcus adopted Rex during one of the hardest periods of his life. His marriage had ended. He'd moved from a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs to a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. He worked remotely, barely left the apartment some days, and had begun to understand, slowly and reluctantly, what real loneliness felt like. Not the romantic kind that poets write about, but the heavy, airless kind that settles in your chest like wet sand. He hadn't planned on getting a dog. He'd gone to the shelter with his neighbor, Priya, who was adopting a cat. But Rex, then called Biscuit by the shelter staff, had pressed his nose against the cage door and looked at Marcus with such direct, unhurried certainty that Marcus found himself filling out adoption paperwork before he'd even fully processed what he was doing.
The road was quiet,
"That
the
dog
afternoon
chose
sun
you,"
low,
Priya told him afterward.
Marcus had stepped off the curb without looking his mind somewhere else entirely, his body moving on autopilot the way it had every single day for the past 3 years. He had a headset in one ear,
so Marcus
a coffee in his left hand,
the dog needed
a leash
feeding at consistent
in his right.
times.
And at
So
the other
Marcus
end of that
ate
leash
consistently.
was Rex,
The dog
a
needed
3-year-old
play,
mixed breed with a
contact,
barrel
presence.
chest, a
So
face full
Marcus
of
provided
wrinkles,
those things,
and the kind
and
of
in
eyes that
providing
seemed
them,
to understand
found that he
things
needed
humans
them
couldn't.
too. Dogs don't care
And
about your past.
before Marcus's foot
They
fully
don't
left the
worry about your
sidewalk,
future.
Rex did
They
something
live
no training could
entirely
have
in the
taught
moment
him.
they're
He
in,
didn't
and they pull you into that
bark.
moment with them.
He didn't
Animal behaviorist
pull.
Alexandra
He launched
Horowitz.
all 48
Researchers at
pounds
the
of him
Human Animal
sideways
Bond Research
and directly
Institute
into
have documented
Marcus's
what
legs,
dog
sending
owners
both
have
of
known
them tumbling
intuitively for
backward onto the
centuries.
concrete just
The
as a
bond
black
between
pickup
humans
truck.
and dogs is neurologically
Driver
real.
distracted and moving
When a person
well
looks
above
into
the
a
speed
dog's
limit
eyes,
blew
both
through the
experience a
intersection
rise
without
in
slowing
oxytocin,
down. The
the
truck
same
missed
bonding
Marcus
hormone
by
released
less than a
between mothers
foot.
and
The rush of
newborns.
air moved his hair.
Dogs have been
The
our
sound,
companions
the
for
mechanical
somewhere
scream of
between
rubber and engine
15,000 and 40,000
didn't fully
years.
register until
They
it was
are,
already
in
gone.
a very literal
Marcus
sense,
sat on the sidewalk
shaped
for
by
a long
us,
moment.
and we by them.
His
Marcus
coffee
didn't
was
know
spilled.
any of this
His
when he
knee
adopted
was bleeding.
Rex.
Rex
He
was
just
sitting
knew
on
that
top
when
of
he
his
woke up at
chest,
3 a.m.,
panting,
heart pounding from a
tail
bad
wagging
dream,
slowly,
Rex was already
looking at
there.
him with that expression
Warm weight against
Marcus
the
had
side,
never quite been
breathing
able to
slow
name.
and steady,
The one that
like
said,
a metronome for his anxiety.
"I see you.
What dogs know
I've
that
always
we don't.
seen you."
In
This
the weeks
is
after the near accident,
not a story about
Marcus
a miracle.
found himself
It is a
reading
story
everything
about what
he could
happens
find
when we
about
stop long
canine
enough to
cognition.
understand the creature
What
sitting at
had
our
Rex
feet
actually
and what they are willing to
perceived in
do
that
for us
fraction of a second?
without asking for
Was it
anything in
the sound
return.
of the
A
engine,
bond built before
a shift
Woods
in
Marcus
Marcus's
adopted
body
Rex
language,
during one of the hardest
something in
periods
the
of his
air?
life.
The
His
truth,
marriage had
according to
ended.
scientists,
He'd moved from a
is probably
3-bedroom
all of
house
the
in the
above,
suburbs to a
and more.
1-bedroom apartment
Dogs
downtown.
process the
He
world
worked remotely,
through an entirely
barely
different
left the
sensory
apartment some
architecture
days,
than we do.
and had begun to
Their hearing
understand,
range extends
slowly
far
and
beyond
reluctantly,
ours, capable
what
of
real
detecting
loneliness
sounds
felt
at
like.
4 times the distance a human
Not the
can.
romantic kind that
Their sense
poets
of
write
smell
about,
is
but the
conservatively
heavy,
estimated to
airless
be
kind that
10,000
settles
to
in your chest like
100,000
wet
times
sand.
more acute.
He hadn't planned
They
on
can
getting
detect
a dog.
subtle changes
He'd gone
in
to the
human
shelter
body
with his
chemistry,
neighbor,
including the hormonal shifts that accompany fear,
but
stress,
Rexy then
illness,
called Biscuit.
and even
By the
certain
cells,
cancers.
Staff had pressed his
More
nose
relevant
against the
to what
cage
happened
door
with Marcus,
and looked at Marcus with
dogs
such
are
direct,
extraordinarily
unhurried
attuned
certainty
to movement
that Marcus
and
found
spatial
himself
awareness.
filling out adoption
They
paperwork
process visual
before he
information
even
faster
fully
than humans,
processed what he was
which
doing.
is why they
That
sometimes
dog
seem
chose
to
you,
react to things
Priya
before
told
those
him
things
afterward.
have fully
She was
entered our
right.
field of consciousness. Rex almost certainly heard the truck before Marcus did. He may have felt the vibration through the ground. He may have detected a shift in the air pressure that preceded the vehicle's arrival. But there's another element that science is only beginning to quantify: the emotional attunement between bonded dogs and their humans. Studies have shown that dogs can read human emotional states with remarkable precision, not just from facial expressions, but from posture, gait, vocal tone, and biochemistry. A dog who has lived with someone for years develops a finely tuned internal map of how that person moves, behaves, and responds. Any deviation from that pattern registers as a signal. Marcus had been distracted, unusually so. He was mentally replaying a difficult phone call with his ex-wife. His attention was fractured. His pace was off. His posture was different. Rex, who knew Marcus's ordinary walk the way a musician knows a familiar melody, registered the wrongness before Marcus himself did. What followed was instinct, but instinct built on love. Does this story move you? Thousands of dogs like Rex sit in shelters right now, waiting for someone to look back at them the way Marcus looked at Rex. If this story reminded you of something important, consider sharing it or taking the next step. Share this story, or scroll down to learn how you can make a difference. The anatomy of a split-second decision. Let's slow down what happened on that sidewalk, because it's worth understanding. Rex did not have time to think. The entire sequence, from the moment he detected the threat to the moment he acted, took less time than it takes to blink twice. And yet what he did was not random. It was precise. He didn't run away. He didn't freeze. He moved directly into Marcus's path, redirecting him, using his own body as both signal and barrier. This kind of protective behavior has been documented in dogs around the world, across every breed imaginable. There are thousands of recorded cases of dogs alerting their owners to fires, seizures, gas leaks, intruders, and medical emergencies. In some cases, dogs have been credited with detecting cancer before any clinical test showed it. In others, they have woken sleeping families in time to escape burning houses. In a handful of extraordinary accounts, they have physically placed themselves between their humans and oncoming danger. What drives this? Not training, in most cases. Not a calculated cost-benefit analysis. Something older than language. Something that lives in the muscle memory of an animal who evolved alongside us, who learned that our survival was linked to theirs, and who, somewhere in the long arc of that shared history, began to care about us for reasons that go beyond utility. Dr. Clive Wynne, director of the Canine Science Collaboratory at Arizona State University, has spent his career studying dog behavior and cognition. His conclusion, stated plainly in his book Dog is Love, is that dogs are unique among animals in their capacity for love, not a human projection of the word, but something functionally and neurologically analogous to it. The dog's enormous capacity to form affectionate bonds with other individuals, dogs, people, and even other species, is what makes dogs so special. Dr. Clive Wynne, Canine Science Collaboratory. Rex loved Marcus. And love, in this case, had a physical expression, a flying leap into the trajectory of someone who wasn't paying attention at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right force. The aftermath. What changes when you almost die? Marcus doesn't talk about the incident lightly. When he does talk about it, and it took him nearly a year before he could do so without his voice tightening, he focuses less on the truck and more on what happened after. He sat on the sidewalk for what felt like a very long time. His heart was slamming. His hands were shaking. Rex was still on his chest, and Marcus, this man who had grown up being told that men don't cry, who had trained himself over decades to process pain privately and efficiently, burst into tears in the middle of the sidewalk in front of anyone who happened to be walking by. He cried not because he was scared, though he was. He cried because of the sudden, overwhelming awareness of what he had almost lost, and what had saved him. Not a guardrail. Not a reflex. A dog. A dog who had chosen him in a shelter 3 years ago and had never, not once, stopped choosing him since. I realized I hadn't been present, Marcus told me. Not really. Not for a long time. I'd been walking through my own life like it was something happening to someone else. And Rex yanked me back into it. Literally. In the months that followed, Marcus made changes. Small ones at first, putting the phone away on their walks, really looking at the streets they moved through, paying attention. Then larger ones. He started therapy. He reconnected with his daughter, from whom he'd been quietly drifting. He started cooking real meals, calling old friends, saying yes to things he'd been declining out of habit and inertia. He also, for the first time, started telling people about Rex. Really telling them, not the easy, charming version where his dog was funny and cute, but the true version, where his dog had quietly reorganized his life around something worth living for, and then, when the moment came, had risked everything to make sure Marcus got to keep it. The dog at the end of the leash. There is a version of this story that ends with the truck, with the close call, with the tears on the sidewalk. But the version worth telling is the longer one, the one that encompasses 3 years of walks in the rain, of mornings when the alarm went off and Marcus didn't want to get up, but Rex was already nudging him with that insistent, loving patience, of evenings when the apartment was too quiet and Rex's breathing in the corner made it bearable. Most of what dogs give us isn't dramatic. It isn't the moment of sudden rescue. It's the daily, unceasing, uncomplicated presence. It's the way they greet you at the door every single time as if you've returned from a long voyage. It's the way they settle against you when you're sad, without asking what's wrong or offering solutions. It's the way they trust you completely, and in doing so, create the conditions for you to become someone worth trusting. We tend to underestimate this. We talk about dogs as pets, as companions, as comfort animals, categories that are true but somehow inadequate. What dogs are, at their best, is teachers. They teach us presence, because they cannot be anywhere but here. They teach us loyalty, because it is their nature. They teach us that love doesn't require explanation, history, or condition. It just requires showing up. Rex showed up. Every day for 3 years, and then in one critical half-second, with his entire body. What this story asks of us. Marcus and Rex still walk the same route. They pass the same intersection. Marcus no longer wears his headset on that stretch. He looks both ways, twice, now always twice, and when he does, he feels Rex at the end of the leash, steady and warm, moving with him. He's told this story to enough people now that he's started to notice a pattern in how they respond. Almost everyone says the same thing, in different words. I need to pay more attention to my dog. Or, I've been thinking about adopting. Or, most quietly, I didn't realize they felt things that deeply. They do. They feel things with a depth and immediacy that most of us spend our lives trying to access. They don't second-guess their love or ration their loyalty or make you earn their attention. They give it fully and they keep giving it because that is what they are, creatures built for connection, for bond, for the kind of presence that we, with our complex and distracted minds, keep struggling to maintain. If this story does anything, Marcus hopes it reminds people to look down. To really look at the animal at the end of the leash, the one sitting on the couch next to you, the one pressed against your leg right now, breathing slow and steady, watching you with those eyes that know something you don't. They are watching out for you. The least we can do is watch out for them. For the dogs who are still waiting. Rex's story has a happy ending. But for every Rex who found his Marcus, there are hundreds of thousands of dogs sitting in shelters across the country right now. Dogs with the same capacity for loyalty, the same alert intelligence, the same deep and wordless willingness to love, who haven't found their person yet. Some of them have been there for weeks. Some for months. Some are senior dogs who were surrendered by families who moved or changed circumstances and who sit in their kennels with a patience that is heartbreaking to witness. Some are young dogs, full of energy and potential, who just need someone to give them the structure and the bond that Rex found in Marcus. They are waiting. Not passively, they're watching every person who walks through the door. They're pressing their noses against the cage. They're making eye contact with the same steady, uncomplicated certainty that Rex showed Marcus in that shelter 3 years ago. Some of them will save a life someday, in a dramatic and visible way, the kind that ends up in a story like this one. Most of them will save lives more quietly, in the way that dogs almost always do. By showing up, by being there, by restructuring a person's world around something warm and alive and real. All of them deserve a chance to do it. Be someone's Rex. Share this story with someone who needs to read it, or take the next step and visit your local shelter. One look might change everything. Find a dog near you. Epilogue. Rex, 3 years later. Rex is 6 now. His muzzle has gone gray at the edges, and he moves a little more slowly on cold mornings. He still sleeps against Marcus's side. He still greets him at the door with that particular joy, the one that makes you feel, no matter what kind of day you've had, that your return was the most important event of the afternoon. Marcus has a photograph on his desk. It's blurry. Someone took it on a phone camera just minutes after the incident, before Marcus had fully composed himself. He's sitting on the sidewalk. His knee is bleeding. His coffee cup is lying on its side. And Rex is on his chest, tail mid-wag, looking directly at the camera with an expression that is difficult to describe. Content, maybe. Like something has been completed. Like a task has been performed exactly as intended. Marcus doesn't need a caption for the photo. He knows what it says. I've got you. I've always got you. Now pay attention.